We always get the great, we always get the best questions from the people that are watching our videos. This week, we're going to answer the question, does human factors, is that supposed to be part of post-market surveillance? And the answer is yes. It absolutely needs to be part of post-market surveillance, but the explanation will help you understand why. So, number one, human factors, for those of you that don't know what human factors is, it's a field that is looking at the interface between the user and the user interface of any product. And it originally developed out of a combination of industrial engineering and psychology. And the first really well documented case of applying human factors was for airplanes. During World War II, they were having bombers and other planes that were landing, and the landing gear would be um, withdrawn at the time of landing, and of course, the nose of the plane would crash onto the runway, and it would be sort of a crash landing or a skid to a stop instead of the way they were supposed to land. And they realized when they went back and investigated why this is happening, sort of their root cause investigation, like who was the genius that came up with two levers that look exactly the same that are side by side, one for the flaps and one for the landing gear? They just grabbed the wrong lever and pulled it up and withdrew the landing gear so the nose went down. And if they had made them very different or different locations, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So the user interface is the levers, and the user is a pilot that's worrying about a bunch of different things simultaneously while they're trying to land an airplane. And so it's a very dynamic, stressful situation with a lot going on. And these two levers are in the exact same place, and they reach for them and they grab the wrong one. So the initial solution was very, very elegant and simple. They just put a tire on the lever that was for the landing gear, and they put a wing on the lever that was for the flaps. So, oh, I'm grabbing the wrong one because a wheel feels nothing like so they don't even have to look at the lever. They just know, oh, this one's for landing gear and this one's for flaps because they look like it. So that contextual cue, the physical feel of it, the shape of it, and the way it looks, it's a different color. It's a black wheel versus a white wing. Looks different color, different shape, doesn't feel the same. This is going to be really helpful, and it solved the problem. So that's a win-win here. Like we've implemented something very simple to help the user with the user interface, the lever. We've modified the lever very cheaply to fix this problem so they don't grab the wrong lever. And the same thing could very easily happen in any kind of product, not just medical devices, but any kind of product. And so another way of solving the problem would then put one on one side of the plane and put the other one on the other side of the plane so you're not reaching for the same place. When you put the two levers side by side, that creates the potential hazardous situation where you could grab the wrong lever very easily. So by putting them in a different place in the cockpit, that really helps. Now, in the medical device field, we're in the last 20 years, the medical device industry has said we have evidence that use errors are occurring. People are using devices incorrectly by accident in most cases. And because they're making these mistakes on when they use the device, they're hurting people. So whenever you have an injury, a serious injury or death that's caused due to a use error, so that's what they call these, not user error. They never use the term user error because they don't want to imply that it's the user's fault. It's the company's fault for not thinking that, hey, these two user interfaces are side by side. You might grab the wrong lever. Same thing can happen on any product. So it's the company that is designing the product. It's their responsibility to think of that as a potential error that could occur and prevent it. In the design of the device, that's the first priority. Design it out of the problem, out of the situation. Number two, create a protective measure. You go to reach for the lever, you turn, and they say, that's the wrong button. Are you sure you want to do that? And you might have so many seconds before it kicks in. That would be a protective measure. And then the third scenario would be information provided by the manufacturer to the user. That could be in the form of instructions, labeling, or training, or all three. So you can put a big label on there. This one is the right one, and this is the wrong one. This is for flaps. So just putting a label on it, if you're not looking at it, you're just reaching for it unconsciously or semi-consciously, you go to reach for that lever, you're going to grab the wrong lever because you're not paying attention to the label. We don't always read the instruction. We don't always read the label. Just like when we go through a door, we don't always notice the sign that says push to open instead of pull, or vice versa. So that's part of it. Part of it is the instruction for use. You have a 100-page instruction manual. You may not absorb everything in that manual, and you may not provide training that's adequate, or somebody might just skip the training or not pay attention to the training. So all of those things could happen. So it's not enough just to provide warnings or precautions or training or instructions or labels. You're supposed to implement design controls first, then protective measures in that order, and the labeling and instructions and training are last. So why do you need to have post-market surveillance? Well, there are two reasons for it. The first one is it is a requirement. What a lot of people don't realize is that in 14971, which is the risk management standard, it says at the very end, the last step, clause 10, that you shall implement post-market surveillance, both on production and in the use of the product in the field. You're supposed to implement post-market surveillance to verify and monitor whether the risk controls you put in place are actually effective, and if there are any new use errors or other risks that are hazards, harms that are occurring that you weren't anticipating. So it's not just related to usage, just any risk. You're supposed to be monitoring for other risks that are occurring, other injuries, serious injuries, or deaths, or use errors. All of these things are supposed to be monitored as part of your risk management program. So all those risk controls you put in place, the design controls, the protective measures, and the labeling, and the training, and the instructions, you're supposed to monitor those risk controls to see if they're effective and see if there are new situations that evolve over time that require you to change the way you're doing things. So it's a requirement in clause 10 to monitor, do post-market surveillance of risk controls, and all these things you're doing for human factors are risk controls. The second part of this is because when you do any kind of a validation of a study, it's never perfect. For example, the FDA guidance document for human factors says that you're supposed to do a minimum of 15 users in a summative validation per user group. So if you have two user groups like laypersons and doctors, or laypersons and professional healthcare providers, those are two user groups, 15 people each. That's 30 people minimum to do this study. And so you validate that your instructions, your training, and your risk controls that you've designed into the product are all adequate, and you verify that during this simulated use study called a human factor study or a summative usability study. But that's only 15 to 30 people. That, even though the requirement is you're supposed to represent the entire US population, that doesn't mean it actually does. It might not be enough to just ask 15 people what they think about a product, or even 30 people about a product, and watch what they do to get a true comprehensive view of the whole world. And it changes over time. What was okay initially when you launch a product might change in the future as technology changes, preferences change, what people are used to changes. In the past, people turned knobs to turn on a TV and change their channel. If you show a 12-year-old a knob on a TV, they might not even know what it's for. People use remotes now. The contextual experience of all the teenagers out there is, I'm used to a remote. They're not necessarily used to knobs like we had when I was a kid. So things change over time. You have to take that into account. And the only way you can take that into account is you continue to monitor people on what they're doing and what mistakes they're making. That's post-market surveillance. So you have to look at, over time, it's going to be given to a broader number of people. It's going to be used for more things than you originally intended for, and things change over time. Technology changes, preferences change, way we solve problems changes. So you have to do the post-market surveillance because of change. and as well as the fact that your original study was limited. It's only going to cover a very small sampling, and you really ought to rely on post-market surveillance to verify that your original sampling was accurate and representative. So those are the reasons why you need to do post-market surveillance as part of your human factors process. It doesn't end with validation and submitting a report to the FDA. It has to be followed up with some post-market surveillance to make sure it stays effective and to make sure when you launch it to the whole world, it's going to continue to be effective for the whole world, not just the 15 or 30 people you originally tried it with. So that's why human factors engineering is part of post-market surveillance, or post-market surveillance is part of human factors. And it's not an option. You have to do it as part of clause 10 and 14.971. And you also have to do it because times change. You also have to do it because a validation with 15 people is never enough. You always have to keep on watching the process and see if there's a problem. So I hope that helps. If you found this useful and for your company to explain to your team why they need to do this as post-market surveillance, please hit the like button and share it with people on your team so they can learn a little bit from it. And if you have any suggestions for next week's live streaming video that we're going to do, please put it in the chat or the comments below. I check out the chats every Friday after we do the live streaming at 12:30. So see you next week. Bye-bye.